Hey, good morning, everybody. Robert Phoenix back on the case. A little bit later today because, first of all, went super, super long last night. 4 hours deep on Sunday Night Astro Live. I think it's the longest stream I've ever done, whether it was with the astrology work or whether it was through the 15 minute side. I've had some long streams with Steve and Chris on the Friday Farcast, getting up to maybe close to 3 hours, about 245, 250, something like that. But nothing as close to or anywhere near as long as we went last night. And if you didn't catch it, you would have seen bug apocalypse starting to happen on my patio out here. You can see to the left of me, behind me, there's a wasp nest back there. You see that right there? It's hanging out right in the beam of the building, the house. So yeah, the bug thing was really interesting last night. At first, it was like kind of cool. It was like, oh, what's this bug? And then all of a sudden, it was like, man, there were a lot of bugs, and there were bugs that I was not familiar with. And generally speaking, if you're not familiar with a certain thing, you want to keep a bit of a safe distance until you and that thing develop a relationship, and then you can begin to interact. So I was becoming acquainted with the place that I share my the species that I share my place with. Okay, so but it wasn't terrible. It wasn't terrible. It was interesting. So and then this morning, because I ran and I always get really like charged up after the shows, and it took a very long time for me to go to sleep, and of course, I had to ingest more so-called nuggets of truth, healthy nuggets of truth, which, by the way, is like swallowing wormwood these days. And unfortunately, I'm gonna have to get into some of that this morning in order to keep it real, as they say. Um, yeah, and then I had an electrician come out this morning, and it was a very cool experience. And I'm going to share that experience at the end of the show because it's actually pretty uplifting. And we all need something uplifting during times that are actually quite demoralizing in a lot of ways. Quite demoralizing. So, chin up, right? Chin up, head in the swivel, eyes in the back of your head. These are the times we're living in. And unfortunately, the trust in our society has eroded to minus levels, and not just here, not just here. It's also happening in uh, in Europe, Europe as well. Europe is having big problems, big problems. And what's interesting about Europe, I didn't watch this because I try to limit what I watch. I watch some things because I don't want to stick my head in the sand. Other things I don't want to watch because I don't want to be fed a steady diet of just psychological and spiritual abuse. Right? That's called discernment. Okay, it's called discernment. There's a point of diminishing returns when it comes to viewing certain pieces of media. But you can read the headlines. You can read the headlines, and you can begin to get a picture as to what's happening. So, under the guise of uh, justice, true justice, and racial discrimination, there was a family in Gothenburg, which is in Sweden, and Gothenburg actually plays kind of a role in the formation of my theoretical family roots, going up to the kind of the northern tip of Holland, right, the very north of Holland. Getting into that sort of place where the Dutch and the Swedes kind of like have that kind of northern thing going on. That's where theoretically, I've looked this up, that on my mother's side, great 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 grandfather came from that Gothenburg area. The last name of the family was Van Nostrand, which is of the North Strand or of the North Land. It was very typical to have names like this back in the day, as they say. And he left a wife behind in Gothenburg, right? I believe that's where the ship originated from. He may have come from a different part of Holland, the North Strand, the place of the North Strand. He left a wife behind there, and he came to the U.S. with a younger wife. So he was planning on breeding and seeding, and he did that and landed in Long Island, where the family became very prominent, and his sons again theoretically uh, fought in the Revolutionary War. Right, they were prominent Dutch Long Island family, and they became merchants and did quite well for themselves. In fact, the family amassed a pretty considerable amount of money, so much that they actually have a street named after them in New York City called Van Nostrand, right, or of the North Strand. And unfortunately, my mother's father got kind of. Oh, and there was a publishing company too, Van Nostrand Press, part of the family. So, but unfortunately, my mother's father and his father, whatever, they got kind of cut out of the money loop. So they didn't get any of that kind of prestigious, not even prestigious, but they didn't get any of that fat new world wealth. That got funneled off into a different part of the family. So he was a bus driver. That's what his gig was, and I've talked about him a little bit before. Uh, I called him Pop Pop. That was my name for my grandfather, Pop Pop and Nanny. Nanny was from Liverpool. She was from Liverpool. She was born in Liverpool. She was a Liverpudlian. But then her parents or her mother actually came from Ireland to Liverpool and met a man in Liverpool and they had a fish and chip shop. And that's ultimately where my grandmother was born. And so my mother is a third generation Irish. And on the father's side, Big Dutch. But what was really interesting is my mother did one of these 23andMe things, and they found there wasn't a lot that they found other than what came through the matrilineal side, but they had a small slice of her genetic code as originating from Iberia, which is, as we know, is Spain, right? Which I thought was interesting. So my grandfather was a bus driver. He was a Virgo, so ruled by Mercury. Of course, he'd be a bus driver. And he was kind of an interesting character in his own right, a little goofy. He was kind of goofy. He was really, really into like Rosicrucianism. I thought that was really interesting. He was really into Rosicrucianism. And I remember we went to the Rosicrucian Museum in San Jose, which is partially where I grew up. I've been growing up for a long time now, but that was like an early stage of growing up. And he was so fascinated by the sarcophagi and the symbols. Man, he wanted to go back the next day. He just wanted to swim in this kind of Rosicrucian symbolism. And I told the story before when he visited us in San Bruno, which is the first place I lived in California as a young lad, that we went to that water temple, which I referred to in uh, just outside of Millbrae, on the border of Millbrae and Burlingame, that really kind of Tartarian looking temple. And again, he had to go back there. It was like, he was willing. I mean, we lived probably about, I don't know, 10 miles away. And to get there, you would have had to like walk some really, really steep hills. And he was willing to go walk back to this place because he was so moved by it. So he had this weird kind of like connection with symbolism and lodges, and maybe that's where I kind of got some of this from. He wasn't a Mason or anything. He was just a bus driver. And I told the story before. He met my grandmother at a. They used to have like these diners on the turnpikes. So if you were a bus driver, you would pull in, and you could actually park and go get a bite to eat or coffee. And she was working at one of these diners at the turnpike, and I guess he struck up a relationship with her. And I have to say, my grandmother was bad news, man. She was bad news. She was totally bad news. She was politically correct, though. I have to say, she was politically correct. One time, my uncle kept saying the word jigaboo, and he was laughing and laughing, and I thought it was funny. I didn't know what the word meant. I had no idea what it meant, and I was only 4 years old at the time. And so she said, "Say it again, and I'm going to wash your mouth out with soap." So she did. She washed my uncle's mouth out with soap. She sanitized his mouth, which is what the washing of the mouth means with soap, right? You're sanitizing the mouth. And because, I thought my uncle was my friend at the time, my ally, he was much older than me, by the way. I said, I want to try it. I want to try it. So I got my first taste of soap. And believe me, I didn't like it. I didn't like it. And, and to this day, I don't think I ever said that word again, except maybe till now or to tell the story. And that was it. All right. That was it. And not because my grandmother washed my mouth out with soap. I just find it a really unappealing term. Okay, just a really unappealing term. And then so my uncle eventually, man, he goes through some weird stuff, man. He goes, I don't even want to go down that rabbit hole. But he eventually starts reading the Dan Brown books, and oh my God, he's all into the like the Lost Key and Gnosticism and all this other stuff. And I was like, oh gee, it must run in the family somehow. But my grandmother, she was a cancer, and tough lady, tough lady, very tough lady, hard. She didn't have a lot of that cancerian nurturing going on. The claws were always out with dear old Nanny. But as a little kid, I loved her, and she would come to California every now and then. I saw her a couple times. She died. She died when I was quite young. I think it was around maybe 9 years old, and it was a really interesting. Now that I think about this trip, it's a really interesting experience. So my we used to go canoeing. I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little bit. I just want people to kind of show up, and sometimes when you tell a bit of a personal story in the midst of a kind of a hot war zone that we're currently in, sometimes it kind of cools things out a little bit. And I'd never made this connection before, but we used to go canoeing as a little family, and we'd go to the Russian River. I always thought it was interesting that it was known as the Russian River, and not Russian in the fact that hey, that river is Russian, Rushi. No, Russian as in Russia, and there was a pretty significant kind of Russian presence in California, a place called Jenner by the Sea, and they've got old Orthodox Russian churches that were there from a long time ago. Very interesting stuff. Anyway, the Russian River was called the Russian River because there was Russian influence in that area. So we would go canoeing, and we were pretty good at it. I was always kind of in the middle, my mother in the front, my father in the back. And it was this weekend. It was this weekend where we got caught on a rapid. And back then we had plastic bags. It wasn't really like the hefty bag world that it is now. It was much more kind of cellophane-ish, and thin, but wrapping your stuff up. And we hit this rock. And at that time, I didn't know how to swim. I had not had any swimming lessons, but I had a life preserver on. And I don't think my mother had a life preserver on at the time. I don't think she did. My father did because my father didn't know how to swim. He was an adult and he didn't know how to swim. So he had the life preserver on. And we hit this rock in this rapids. And all of a sudden, we're tilting, tilting, tilting. We start taking on water and boom, the canoe just flips. Right. And everybody goes. Everybody goes. Canoe goes downstream, paddles go downstream. Mother goes downstream. I'm going downstream. And I've got the life preserver on. So I'm floating. I'm just going with the current. And eventually I wind up on the bank of this river, and I'm kind of holding on to this tree. And my father, again, he doesn't know how to swim, and my mother is struggling, and he just kicks it into gear and does everything instinctually, and he winds up scooping her up and taking her to the riverbank, and then eventually we catch up with and everything. All of our food and shit is gone. All we have left after that is just the paddles, and we found the life preserver. And at that point, my mother's gonna have the life preserver on because she thought she could swim. She's a Pisces, but she couldn't swim in those conditions. And that's the day that when we got back from the canoe trip, she found out that her mother had died. Now I'm putting all that together, right? That was an interesting kind of moment, like capsizing and my mother almost dying, and then her mother dying. It was a very very interesting moment. Now that I think about it, never thought about it in those terms before. Never thought about it in those terms. And then my father, just to kind of round the story off, my father was a guy that taught himself a lot of things. Like he was the most self-taught person I'd ever met. And one of the things he did is he taught himself how to swim. And we lived in Laguna Niguel, just outside of Laguna Beach. And we lived in this community that had a community pool. It was the first time we'd ever lived in a place like that. And we would go there at night, use that pool a lot. And we'd go there at night. And my father literally taught himself how to swim in that pool at night, facing his fears. He was always facing his fears. And like I said, he was theoretically underemployed, but I look back on it now and it's actually pretty inspirational. He had a real fear of public speaking. So he joined Toastmasters. I mean, he did this, right? He consciously would do this stuff. And I think a lot of that had to do with his Mars and Scorpio, which he had conjunct Jupiter in his chart. So yeah, he taught himself how to swim at night where nobody could see him, and back and forth, back and forth. And then eventually he got it. All right, there's your little homily story of the morning. Let me check in and see if there's anybody joining us today in chat. Let's see what we have here. Oh, we got 108 people watching. Thanks for being here today, by the way. Yes, we had two in the family. It was okay, what do we have here? I was on a canoe trip the day that I got to talk to my father for the first time in my life. I was 30. Let's go. Let's just do a quick check-in. There's Ian Barber, Isla. There's Charles. He says, great show last night. ESPN is being culturally weaponized. Amazing. Oh, well, they got into it for a while. They had Jamel Hill. They had the Jamel Hill thing going on. Now, let me just do a quick refresh here because I can't see my picture. They had Jamel Hill going on there for a while, and then they stopped it. They had a show called The Six. What a cool sounding show that was, right? The Six. And there I am. The Six. And it was an abysmal failure. Hold on, let me just do this. It was an abysmal failure. Nobody watched it. The ratings were horrible. Jamel Hill and Michael Smith were just doing everything in their power to wokeify. They were wokeifying everybody, right? Wokeifying. And the ratings were terrible. The NFL, oh, there's one of these big black bugs from last night. He's back again. It's a beetle. It's like a very interesting beetle. Man, this thing is a trip. I'm actually watching this, enjoying it. Watching him move, man. The legs, the cantilevered legs and everything. Oh my God. What a trip. Like nature is a trip. So maybe I got some beetle. Maybe I got some beetle juice in my animal totem world. I'm gonna look up beetle. Yeah, so they tried it, and then the NFL figured out really quickly that the whole Colin Kaepernick kneeling thing was just not playing. It was just not playing with the ratings. It was not playing with the fans. So they had to do something like lickety split. And what they did is they stopped broadcasting the national anthem, which I don't have a problem with, by the way. I don't think the national anthem belongs in sports. I don't. I really don't. I don't even think sports belongs as part of the American landscape anymore either. But this whole idea of merging sports and country and God and duty, I don't know. It just seemed very propagandistic to me. So not broadcasting the national anthem, not doing the national anthem. Probably should have been like early. It should have been adopted very very early. But they were failing. The NFL was failing, and now they're on the other side of the ledger sheet, right? They are on the other side because they're sniffing which way the winds are blowing, just like Jim Mattis, the traitor, and Kelly, General Kelly, the traitor. They're sniffing the way the winds are blowing, and this is not a really encouraging sign here for the so-called United States of America. I'll get into some of that today. Let me just see what we have here. There's Uncle Glenn. Good morning. Shine Cross. Morning. All weird. I clicked on the live broadcast, threw back to June 3rd's broadcast. I had to close out and reload. You enjoyed the show last night. There's Shannon Wise River. Hi, Shannon. Nice to see you. Ani Brito, the wench of the wrench, the sheriff. We love you, Ani. Glad you're here. Christy Tesmerk in the house. Phoebe Kane in the house. Marlene McNichols. Good morning. Michael, DJ MC. Let's see who else. Joe Mama. Joe Mama. Glad you're with us, Joe. I mean that literally and figuratively. Judy Anderson in the house. Saul, son of Lurie. Good morning. I'm a huge fan of Linda Khanov's work with horses. I know Linda, and I did an interview with Linda a long time ago, back when I was on. I think I might have been on. Uh, it wasn't Spreaker. I think I interviewed Linda on Blog Talk. I got low system resources. All right, just get out of here. I interviewed Linda on Blog Talk, and I knew about her work with horses. I'd met Linda through her husband, Steve Roach, who is a great space musician guy with a very interesting story. So I became friends with Steve and kind of became friends with Linda. They're really good people, by the way. Let's see. Cindy Burton's in the house. Galicia, northern Spain, very Celtic. I love your family stories. Thank you for sharing. Oh, you're welcome. Sorry, not a fan of racing, whether horses or dogs. Reeks of exploitation. Yeah, I think I think we can. The dog racing thing is not good, obviously. And unfortunately, horse racing unfortunately has become kind of inhumane, right? They went through a bunch of horse deaths down in Southern California near San Diego, Del Mar, and if they didn't hop them up and they didn't treat him so poorly, I think horses like to run, right? Maybe there would be a kind of a way to do that, but not the way that it's become. Rob Chopra, hello from Orlando. Rob, I got your email. I'm gonna shoot you back with an email. Okay. I just have not been able to get into email that much because I've been so busy. Just trying to keep it together. My girl, Heather Eel in the house. Love you, Heather. Glad you're here. Nice to see you. So proud of you. Sharon Q. Good morning, Sharon. There she is. Techno Brat. Emily Moore. Janet Gaudier, one of my favorite Geminis in the house. Janet and I have a river story. Janet and I floated down the Rio Grande in some inner tubes. How long ago was that, Janet? It must have been back in what, 2010 or something like that. I think it was 2010. Yeah, 2010. Fort Ross, also known as Fort Roos, Mary Black. Fort Roos. I had a great time floating down that river. It seems like so many years ago. In a lot of ways, it really was. Creamy's in the house. Who else do we have? Cheryl. Okay, Cheryl, come on back. We'll be here. Me and the bugs will still be here. Me and my bug friend. I got to find out what this bug is. I'm fascinated with it. I'm totally fascinated with this bug. What are my thoughts on speculation of assassination event beginning June 20th? Well, we're going into that heavy phase, June 20th, right around the eclipse phase. That's going to be the eclipse. That's zero Cancer. I talked about this last night. The Sabian symbol being on a ship at sea, sailors lower one flag and raise another, which is very reminiscent of what happened during the Bolshevik Revolution and the Navy that played a role. Look, at this point, I wouldn't put it past anybody At this point, I wouldn't put it past them killing a clone, making it look like Trump. I mean, we're in a hall of mirrors now, okay? We are in a hall of mirrors. Oh, thanks, Deanna. Dina. Yeah, Dina. Hope you're okay up there in Rose City, by the way. Um, so what else do we have here? Rob's in Orlando. I'm in Orlando. Hit me up. Hit me up. You may want to send that as a private message. Just saying. Just saying. FYI. What else do we have here? Let's see. You have to check out a video by Chaziel Sons. We actually played that last week. I think it's an incredible video. We played it last week. We played about 3/4 of it, and then of course YouTube took it down. They don't want that message going out right now. They don't want a message of higher unity going out. They don't. They don't want a message of higher unity going out. I think the reason why young Pharaoh is kind of left alone is because young Pharaoh is in favor of reparations. So, and again, you have to understand that when you're watching young Pharaoh's channel. He is also in Jeff Doherty's camp, Jeff Doherty being the Reformed Christian and that Jesus never existed, right? So they're in that camp. That's kind of part of the astro theological side of things, right? Part of it, not all of it. So, and again, it's like, are you gonna turn away from the message because maybe you agree or disagree with 10 to 15%, maybe 20% of the message? I don't know. That's up to you. That's up to you. I still think Young Pharaoh's videos are worth watching. But the Chaziel Sun video is raw and uncut. I love that video. YouTube hates that video. They hate it. They don't want anything to do with unity or harmony unless it is superimposed. The type of unity and harmony that YouTube and most of the mainstream media, mainstream sports, and even our politicians, not just the United States, but globally, the unity that they are going to embrace is a unity of destruction and chaos and a leveling out of the old world to make the old world a new world, in which case everything will be born anew, ordo ab chao, right? Out of chaos order. And that new unity will be enforced. It'll be enforced. But any talk of unity will not be allowed now because they've got their own version of unity that's in store for humanity at this point. Now, you may play around with this idea of unity, and you may decide that you want to get on a knee or you want to wash somebody else's feet. And maybe that is your version of creating a false, what I would call false narrative or false reality of unity. And if that's your shtick and that's your bag, well, have at it. Have at it. Right? Because what happens is that, and I don't care what the group is. I really don't care what the group is. I don't care if they're black or brown or whatever, right? Anytime, and I've talked about this for a long time, anytime that's one group uses another group to perpetuate, right? To perpetuate a model or to perpetuate a psychic energy exchange. And there is not this true level of equality that rises up together, right? Then you're having one side perpetuate a program or perpetuate a script against another side, and there's a winner and a loser. Okay, that is not true unity. That's not true. True unity, everybody wins. All boats rise together, right? So I've talked about this for a while now, and this is where we're at. The unity that they want to impose is the lowering of one group and the raising up of another group. And you know what? They could say, well, that's been happening for 200 years or whatever, right? And this is the way it's supposed to go. And if you're going to buy into that, then good luck. Good luck. You may as well. We had a family here in North San Antonio. Probably heard about this guy. Guy worked for the army. He worked for the army. He was apparently army intelligence out of whatever the fort is in San Diego. Is it Fort Hood? I think it might be Fort Hood. Anyway, he and his family, wife, his two kids, and even the family cats were asphyxiated. They were asphyxiated. He hooked the tailpipe up to their car, and that was it. That was it. They tapped out. Okay, they tapped out. Terrible, absolutely terrible, 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 terrible image and terrible sign in a lot of ways as well. They left a note on the front door of the house saying the house is booby trapped. And it took police a while to get in because they wanted to make sure that their mission was complete. And I think that he had a sense as to where things were going, and not just from the civil or the social perspective, but inside the command control of the armed forces. Look, and I'm going to be straight up and tell you right now, right, that if this thing, it's already gone hot. It's already gone hot. It's already gone live. If you're not paying attention, you better pay attention real fast. That people think that the army is going to come in and is going to save them. Uh, no, no, that's not going to happen. That is not going to happen. I'd be very surprised if that was going to happen. We're looking at a total defection process right now in the upper echelon of the chain of command inside the Pentagon. Apparently, Trump had ordered 10,000 uh, officers, not officers, but troops on American soil to quell the riots. And that request was denied to him by the Pentagon. It's not a good sign. Not a good sign. I'm just telling you. Okay. So we're in the smoldering rubble, the smoldering aftermath of what began last week, as soon as the True Node went into Gemini. And I think we're probably going to get hit now with round two of so-called Corona and COVID. I think they're going to be back into lockdown mode. I think they're going to unleash the contact tracers. This will be the next sort of wave that we're going to be dealing with. So just remember that, right? The cities and may not be as on fire or shattered as they were, but get ready for the next round in this ongoing series of deep and dangerous false flag operations. Um, I was thinking a lot about the washing of the feet, and that started with the Pope. And the Pope decided that he was gonna wash some feet. This was a while ago, maybe about a year ago. And I knew that when the Pope started to wash some feet, that that was going to be that's a program, right? That's a program. They're inserting the program into the collective, which is very Mars and Pisces in a lot of ways, because the feet rule Pisces. The feet totally rule Pisces. And the other thing that's really interesting from an astrological perspective is that Sagittarius rules the knees. And we have the South Node in Sagittarius, and we see people, taking a knee, which is a sign of supplication and surrender. So the astrology is hot and on the dot right now. If you don't believe in astrology, I'm here to help you understand the cosmic theater that we're all living in right now. And it's pretty clear to me. And we're headed towards, Mars and Aries, which I talked amply about last night. It's going to be very hot, very, very hot. All right, let me just check out a few more you in chat, do a little bit of the invocation here. Where were the contract tracers at the riots? Oh, they were probably there. They were probably there. Was Trump kicked off Twitter? No, not yet. But he was. He did a thing on Instagram, a tribute to George Floyd. They flagged it for having some form of copyright violation, and they removed it. Okay. What else? We have your moon conjunct Pluto at half degree right now. Moon conjunct Pluto intensity. Oh, here's another friend. We got a bumblebee, looks like. Oh, it's a horsefly. He's a horsefly. He's impersonating a bumblebee. This is the horsefly is impersonating a bumblebee. He's right there. He's got a, I think the horsefly's with Antifa. Privyet Robert, whatever. Dumb question. Where do I find the Sunday night show? Over on my 11th house page. Somebody could put a link in there for Cindy to be great. Kings Island Amusement Park began a lawsuit against Dr. Amy Acton since she opened zoos and movie theater. Oh, great. That's great. Wade Wilson in the house. Get a Faraday box or dump the smartphones, people. Yes, I'd agree with that. Dump smart. Dump smart. Yep. It takes 20 minutes for your podcast to appear live on YouTube. Hey, Debisu, nice to see you. Way to go. Ursulia at Emily Wright, because it's a term that came from the movie Contagion. There's no dialogue for riots. Maybe Contagion Part 2. Hips and thighs. Oh, my bad. Yes, hips and thighs. It does go into knees. It does go into knees. And that's also where Capricorn begins to show up on the knees. Hips, thighs, knees, Capricorn shins, Aquarius ankles. Right? There we go. Yes, Capricorn knees. Yeah, I think they come together, right? They do come together. Even so, here's your Capricorn symbolism with the knee, with the bended knee. Jupiter and Capricorn. Pluto conjunction. Yep. There we go. Yeah. All right. So we're clear on that. Sagittarius thighs. I do believe it goes into the knees. That's where Capricorn takes over, about halfway through the knee. There's a spot, I think, between the thigh and the knee where the cusp of Sagittarius and Capricorn meet. And then all the way down to the shins. And then there's that shin part where the ankle and the shin meet. That's the cusp of Capricorn and Aquarius. There we go. There are 23 feathers on one wing and 32 feathers on the other. Eagle and the dollar bill. What body is affected by Taurus? The throat. Taurus is the throat, speaking, right? We talked about algol, fixed star algol, right? Decapitation. I am wondering, is Trump and his team ever going to learn to go on the offensive? They seem to perpetually in defensive mode. I had this Capricorn and Kaepernick. Yep, that's true. Colin Kaepernick. Colin Capricorn. Yeah, good call. He's got Neptune and Uranus and Capricorn. He's a millennial, right? He's a millennial. Yeah. I have Sagittarian legs, by the way. Let's see. What connected to the leg bone? All right, what was I going to talk about? Oh, Trump and his team. Okay. So one of the things that here, before we do that, let's just get into a little invocation here. Dear blessed and holy Father, Mother God of the great central sun, which is the universal light, which is the light of Sananda, Yeshua Emmanuel, we ask that only the highest and best information come through at this time, and that we are given the courage and the strength and the faith and the love and the truth to navigate through these times with one another. And if there's any karmic residue that we have, may be cleansed, purified, clarified, transmuted, cleared away, so we may re-enter our lives as sovereign beings. So be it. All right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Trump and what I think is so. I had this thought about what would have happened if Hillary had been elected. Now, a lot of people assume that if Hillary had been elected, that things would be worse than they are now. And I really have to scratch my head about that. Now, I'm not blaming Trump, by the way, although I do think he has a huge amount of responsibility and accountability for where we are now. And I'm going to get into some of that. Okay. But if Hillary had become president, then everything Hillary, and by the way, there was going to be a Republican ruled Congress and a Republican ruled Senate for 2 years, which would have put a bit of a roadblock, although a lot of those motherfuckers are just turncoats. By the way, did you know that Jim Mattis is related to Benedict Arnold? He has genealogical roots to Benedict Arnold. Wrap your head around that. Picked that up last night. Genealogical roots. Yoichi Shimatsu. Yuichi was, you can read him over on Rents. He was not mincing any words. Wow. Not mincing any words at all. So, Trump, Hillary. Had Hillary been elected, everything would have been pretty, in some ways, overt, right? There were a lot of people that were onto her game. They were onto the server stuff. They, the foundation, all the WikiLeaks shit. It was all out in the open. Had Hillary been elected, all of that intensity, all that glare, all that heat would have been on her. So the theoretical other side could have been on the defensive. But instead, Hillary wasn't elected and covertly went on the offensive. And we know who her partners in crime are, usual suspects. So they've been able to do all this under the cover of darkness and cloak and dagger, with Obama and Valerie Jarrett taking up residence in D.C. and working on the shadow government. That's what they were doing, right? They were working on the shadow government within the zone. And they've been working on the shadow government operation for the last 3 years. And they knew exactly everything that they wanted to do, the steps that they wanted to take. That has been their command control center. So had Hillary become president, it would have been out in the open. She would have had 2 years worth of maybe some quicksand, or running on the beach in wet sand. You know what I mean, or dry sand rather. So it would have been a very, very different scenario, and very different scenario. But instead, Trump got elected, and the challenge with Trump is he's got that Mars on the ascendant in Leo, and his inauguration speech was great. I mean, it was I think fantastic, but they were going after him from the jump. Oh, there was no people there, and they were really, you could just see that they were going all in even at the beginning, and he surrounded himself with essentially was a ship of traitors. The three generals. I don't know about Tillerson. I know that he was one of the guys that was a key. He was a point guy with oil. He probably wanted to have him in because he wanted to know that he would represent big oil inside of the cabinet. But Tillerson was also a Cub Scout, a Boy Scout guy. There's like weird stuff around Tillerson, and then they kick out Bannon, and then they kick out Flynn. Bannon and Flynn are gone. You have Jeff Sessions, who is essentially has his hands tied. We see the revolving door of the attorney general stuff. It just becomes a real shit show at the beginning. Jared Kushner comes in. He's got Goldman Sachs people telling him who to hire. He brings John Bolton in. Are you kidding me? Fucking neocon supreme. Brings John Bolton in, who's a disaster. He wants to get out of Syria. He's got his son-in-law and his daughter. Jared's bringing in this guy who was part of the production crew from The Purge, and he's involved in communications from the White House. It's like, you got to be kidding me. He actually wound up making America great. What's one of the slogans from The Purge. One of the Purge movies, they basically say, this is going to be the scenario. And the scenario is about using this term, and the term is going to be derogatory, and it's going to be racist and fascist. So his name is Josh something. I forget his last name. But apparently, he's a loudmouth and a hotshot. And you got Stephen Miller in there writing speeches. Stephen Miller could write a good speech, I have to say. But he's a hardcore right wing Zionist out of Orange County, California. You go back and you look at some of his really early videos or clips, you know where Stephen Miller is at, right? And Stephen Miller got in through Jeff Sessions. And then now Trump has to deal with Sheldon Adelson. He's got to deal with Bernie Marcus. He's got to deal with Paul Singer. He's got to deal with the Mercer family. He's got to deal with Wilbur Ross, who worked for Goldman Sachs. Wilbur Ross being the bag man that bailed him out. All of a sudden, man, we got a lot of compromise inside the White House. Tons of compromise. A lot. And even his nominees for the Supreme Court were deeply, deeply flawed. I mean, Gorsuch is about as freaking liberal as you can get. He comes out of the Colorado, Denver, Boulder, and then Kavanaugh. Don't even get me started on Kavanaugh and that whole shit show. And I'm pretty convinced that the woman Blasey Ford, I'm pretty convinced that was Kavanaugh and drag. I'm pretty convinced it was Kavanaugh and drag. I think he had to do that. I think because where has Blasey Ford been since then? Anybody know? She's supposed to teach at Stanford. That's what the record says. No interviews, nothing since then. A lot of times these people will stick around and they'll prop them up. But once they serve a purpose, they're gone. They're gone. Kavanaugh was not a good dude. Worked for the Bush family. Barr worked for the Bush family. Kavanaugh's wife was like George Bush's like personal assistant. Came in and totally, uh, you know, fucked around with the whole Clinton stuff, right? He was in there, and he was working theoretically for the state at the time, but he was throwing monkey wrenches into the whole Vince Foster thing. That was his specialty. He was making these assertions that Vince Foster was gay and that Vince Foster went there to the park so he could have some rough trade. And that's what Kavanaugh was doing. That's what his position was. That's exactly and he was, rubber stamping the FISA stuff and just like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. We're going to write the argument for. I mean, these people that he surrounded himself with are not good people. They're not good people. And he should have cleaned house immediately. Like he should have flushed the toilets immediately, but he couldn't. He couldn't. His hands were tied. They were tied. I think Trump has too many political favors that he's got to pay. And right now, I don't know who he's got on his side besides his dipshit, um, little Antichrist son-in-law and his daughter, who's an endangered species, right? Blonde, white, and the Trump family all married. They all married into Jewish bloodlines. Look it up. I'm not making anything up. Just look at it. They married into Jewish bloodlines, and I'm betting that Ivana, not Ivanka. I'm betting Ivana was probably Jewish as well. And there's a lot of people who also believe that Trump is actually Jewish. So do the math on that, right? You know, there are a lot of people who love Israel. They love Israel. When they start seeing that there were a number of parades where the Star of David was morphed into the Antifa flag and basically telling people how much Israel loves Antifa, you may want to rethink that relationship. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. And I was watching one of the Veritas videos around Antifa, and I was looking at their training sessions. It's very clear that Antifa, and their training, by the way, they've been spending, like, they came onto the scene back in 2016, prior to the election, and they showed up in Berkeley, and they were getting their asses whooped. They were getting their asses whooped. They've been in training since then, and it's pretty clear, these training videos, that the techniques that they're learning are Krav Maga, which are taught by the Mossad and the IDF. So they're getting Mossad and IDF training. And what do you think the police force are getting? They're getting IDF training. So now we're getting Antifa and the police getting the same training by the same people. Well, you would think that at the very least, that training would be, together. There would be some sort of a conflict, and may the best man win. Except now the police are being told to stand down, and this has been going on for a while now. They worked this out in Seattle. It's like there was that documentary, Seattle is Dying. That was one of the big themes in Seattle. That the police force had been handcuffed, literally handcuffed. Same thing going on in California. Catch and release, catch and release, catch and release. In California, they worked out the pilot program in San Francisco, where you can steal up to $900 worth of merchandise, $999.99. Flip it around, and you just get a ticket to appear. You don't appear, you get a warrant. How meaningful is that warrant? Not at all. None at all. Nope, 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 nope. So we could see all this stuff was getting worked out. It was gaining R&D in these Democratic cities, where the Democratic mayors, like Jacob Frey, who Jacob Frey was like, he's kind of, look, he may be just, fine and dandy with having no police force in Minneapolis, but if I were him, I'd probably be shitting my pants a little bit. Right, because now they're going to start to ramp up these patrols, right? They're going to arm. Basically, what they're going to do. Here's what they're going to do in Minneapolis. They're thinking of like having this wonderful community sort of, patrol. You remember Curtis Sliwa, right? And the Guardian Angels. It's going to be made Guardian Angels, but with maybe a more, I don't know, socially just message. What they will do is they will take elements from BLM, Antifa, and the Muslim Brotherhood. We'll call them TBM, right? TBH, BLM, Antifa. They will turn them into the community police. They will give them the weapons, right? They're not saying they're going to disarm the police. They said they're going to disband the police. And whoever comes in next, I guarantee you, they will have the arms. Now, the next phase for Minnesota and the state of Minneapolis will be to eradicate it. Right. Eradicate it. It'll be done. It'll be gone. It is over. So for all intents and purposes, and again, I'm not here to sugarcoat things, we're in a very, very intense conflict right now. And Minnesota, the state of Minnesota has been taken. It's been taken. I have no other way to break it down or make you feel better. It's been taken. For all intents and purposes, we have lost a state in the union, and we're about to lose more. We are about to lose more. New York is teetering on the edge. Oregon, Washington, California, probably even Colorado, teetering on the edge. Okay. This is not a good scenario. Not a good scenario. And this gets into the maps, that we've looked at before, where the United States is broken up into these different zones. We saw that with the Hunger Games, the Pan Am map. A lot of the stuff, by the way, is based on, what happens with the New Madrid Fault and the subduction zone. Really, that's what I'm rooting for. I'm serious. I'm very serious. I'm actually rooting for a massive natural disaster to take place. A real big Uranus and Taurus event. That's what I'm rooting for. And I know it sounds like, fucked up or whatever. Go ahead. I'm actually kind of rooting for it at this point. I'd like there to be kind of an ocean-sized gulf between one part of the country and another, right? I'd love for that subduction zone in the Pacific Northwest to essentially, rejoin the lower regions of the Pacific Ocean. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that, right? Because it would put a major, major monkey wrench into whatever's happening. And look, we would lose family, we'd lose friends, and there's a really good chance, hate to say it, we may lose family and friends anyway, right? So I'm just, being straight up here, being straight up. Now, again, all is not lost. All is not lost. Trust me on this. It's not all lost. I'm going to share you some good stories in the show today, and then I'll tell you why it's not lost. But Trump is in trouble. He basically has surrounded himself with traitors. There's no two ways about it. No two ways about it. He surrounded himself with traitors. And I've got information to share with Trump, and I'm going to share it on the show that I'm doing Wednesday with Jay Weidner. And that show will not be live. Jay and I will pre-record that show, but you'll be able to watch it, and you'll hear what Jay has to say. And I'm sure you'll really want to tune in. It's kind of important information. But yeah, if Hillary had won, it would have been a whole different scenario. And I keep hearing, oh my God, we would have been at war with Russia. I don't believe we would have been at war with Russia. I believe that was just a ruse. Isn't it interesting how the word Russia and Rus are very much connected? By the way, Colin Kaepernick's mother, her last name is Russo, red. I've seen pictures of her. She's got red hair. She's Italian. But I think it's interesting that his birth mother is the red mother, right? He's born out of the red womb. That's Colin Kaepernick. Some interesting etymology for you. Yeah, there's a lot going on right now. A lot going on. Let me just bring in some of the more interesting George Floyd stuff. And nobody's talking about really the connection between Floyd and Chauvin, who worked at the same nightclub. And they said that they were there for 17 years. I believe that's a misnomer. I think that that's a number that's wrong. George Floyd. I mean, when we get into the Floyd stuff, it just gets really murky. Really, really murky. What do we see? I mean, let's just go over what we see. We see him in a truck. There's a picture of him in a truck where he's going to trucking school. So now we have an established picture of him going to trucking school and in, I guess, Minnesota. We have a picture of him at the nightclub standing next to a Corona sign. It's another image. We have some images with him doing some porn, right? All right. So these are the images that we have. We have an image of him or video of him basically shortly before what happened in Minneapolis. We have a video of him talking about how inspirational Kobe Bryant or LeBron James is or whatever, right? And how he wanted to turn his life around and, be an inspirational figure. That was, I hate to say it, but that was, a fairly challenging goal in this man's life. Because when they found him, he was dealing with fentanyl. He was dealing with fentanyl and he was dealing with methamphetamine in his bloodstream. He also had a heart condition. What's interesting about George Floyd is that he might, if he did die, it probably wasn't from asphyxiation. It was probably from a heart condition. It might have even been brought on by this COVID-19 because now they're saying that he had the coronavirus, which, I mean, if that's true, and we know that the ACE2 receptor, it has been part of the group that has been more susceptible to coronavirus, that could be a fact. And we know that it does affect the heart. So what's interesting is that George Floyd was busted passing a bum 20. So do you know who's on the 20? Andrew Jackson. Do you know what Andrew Jackson died of? Congestive heart failure. And they just recently took down a statue of Andrew Jackson down in the South. not a saint by any stretch. Trail of Tears story in American history. So I'm not lionizing Andrew Jackson, but he, on the other hand, he did stand up to uh, the uh, the bankers. He did stand up to the Federal Reserve. They didn't like that. They didn't like that shit. They had to wait till 1913. He got their easily malleable and blackmailable Woodrow Wilson onto the scene. Staged, handled, managed by Colonel Mandelhouse. So let's go back to the theoretical scene of the crime with George Floyd and Chauvin, who did not work together for 17 years. Theoretically, Floyd had been there for maybe 3 to 4. It would be impossible for him to work there for 17 years, mostly because he was in prison for 5 of those years in Houston. So let's get the numbers straight. If they did work together and they did know each other in that nightclub, that it was at best maybe a 3-year relationship. And by the way, I've checked all kinds of records for George Floyd as being a citizen living in Minneapolis, and I couldn't find a damn thing. Now, Houston's another story. But nothing in Minneapolis. So now we have this guy who was a security guard at a nightclub. And you know, what's really interesting is that long history of drugs, very long history of drugs. And you would think that at the trucking school, like there's even pictures, you can see bags of drugs dropping out of him when they pull him out of that car. He's dropping like, dime bags of shit. I mean, you look at it. It's on, I can show it to you if you want. Just go look it up. And at a trucking school, you would think that they would drug test, you know, and that he would know that if he was going to be a truck driver, that any trucking company was going to have to, you know, drug test him. It was not a great comeback story, if that's the truth. Not a great comeback story. What's interesting is that there's a friend of his from childhood, supposedly in Minneapolis, a guy by the name of Chris Harris, and this brings up the Gemini twin doppelganger effect. There's another Chris Harris who plays for the Denver Broncos, or he did play for I don't know where he is now. And the whole like Chris Harris, like Harris harass Chris Christ, right? The harassment of Christ. I mean, I'm just playing here on the spot with the name. I'm not saying that there's any diabolical kind of action. I'm just looking at the name, right? Just looking at the name. So where does all this go down? It goes down at a place called Cup Foods. And Cup Foods is a Middle Eastern market, falafel, shawarma, all that stuff. And he's trying to pass that 20 at Cup Foods. Well, beneath Cup Foods, and I've seen the pictures, is a mosque. Like they go down into the basement, and that's where they, face east and bend over, right? In the basement of Cup Foods. So this is kind of an interesting development, just from a location standpoint, because now remember that Ole Damagard, who's been like so Johnny on the spot with this shit, says that they leave clues where this next theoretical false flag or this next event will take place. So let's go back to Georgia, where the CDC is in Atlanta. And the CDC is where we're having the quote unquote COVID-19 corona crisis. And then right around the same time, this is where Ahmaud Arbery, the video of Ahmaud Arbery surfaces, and him being tracked down by a group of people who, by the way, were just trying to protect their property. They've got him on video a number of times, stalking the neighborhood. I mean, he was there ostensibly to case work sites, home areas, because there was no building going on at that time, right? Everything was shut down. And apparently word got out that there was this guy who was cased in the neighborhood. It's kind of, it's kind of another Trayvon Martin sort of narrative, right? Scenario. And then finally they go and they say, hey, it's enough. The problem with what happened with that, and I've talked about this before. And again, I don't know exactly because we have to really be careful with reality now. But these guys were running around. They had shotguns and they were wrestling with Ahmaud Arbery, who didn't want to, you know, go down like that or whatever. And there just happened to be a guy in the truck videotaping everything with his camera. We got to be really, 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 really circumspect with this stuff. Really circumspect. So I'm going to throw this out there. And this is, look, if he died, right? If he died and he was trying to wrestle the shotgun away from those dudes, like, you really shouldn't be doing that. Like, that's really not a good career move. And I don't care what color you are. And I'm going to say this too, that even though it was in the rights of those guys to have a gun in that moment, I'm actually going to say they shouldn't have had a gun in that moment. I'm going to say that they should not have had a gun. I mean, it's their Second Amendment rights, whatever. All they needed to do was stay in the fucking truck and just follow him and just keep videotaping him. That's all they needed to do. That's all they needed to do. If Ahmaud Arbery had a gun, it's a different story, right? They get that on videotape and we're having a different dialogue. So I even have to question now the nature of that event. I have to question the nature of that event. Was that event possibly even staged? I don't know. But that video had been out there for 2 months already. Like, it had already happened. And I don't know what I'm not sure if that's Marietta County or not, but I don't know what the PD or the DA was doing with that. But now all of a sudden the video surfaces 2 months later and they're going after the guys with the shotguns and the guy with the camera. Okay. And now that is the accelerant. And remember that it happens in and around Atlanta, which is where the CDC is located. So now we're beginning to see, and I saw this on my Twitter account, which is deactivated for the moment. I just said, boom, get ready for the next phase. The old one is over, and I can see it as clear as day. People that were watching my Twitter feed knew exactly what I was talking about, and I talked about it. I've been talking about it for a while, right? So what do we have? We have where the CDC was. We have the Ahmaud Arbery event, and the Ahmaud Arbery event leads into the George Floyd event, which brings us to the current gray state. By the way, the movie Gray States never got made. You can watch the trailer. Where does it take place? Minneapolis, staged in Minneapolis. So this is an important piece now because the actual event, or the event between George Floyd and Derek Chauvin takes place at Cup Foods, which is also connected to what's underground. And remember that. That's important. That is an important piece to understand, right? It's underground. And look, I really don't have a beef with Muslim people. And some of you may say, oh, you should, whatever, right? And I don't have a beef. I don't have a beef with anybody, really. But when they become extremist assholes and then they organize around their various types of extremism, then I have a real issue with it. Okay. I know I've met a number of Muslim people, and some of them are the most righteous and loving and truthful people. And they do not want to be bothered, right? They just don't. Okay. And there are groups that are weaponized. Let's be clear about that. They're weaponized. So when I'm talking about this, again, this is not an indictment for an entire religion. It's not an indictment for people that have constellated, in that faith. Okay, so just let's be clear. Be clear. You know, there are a lot of Sufis. There are a lot of Sufis that follow the word of Islam, right? There's a great documentary about Yusu Ndur, who's a great singer, sung a lot with Peter Gabriel. And Yusu Ndur he's a Sufi. He's a Sufi. And the Sufis have been threatened by the more extreme versions of Islam. Do you see what I'm talking about here? These guys, I mean, they're not even united and banded together under one calling or under one faith. You know, we have the Sunnis and um, the other group. It's right on the tip of my tongue. You know, they're not even united under one faith. So again, what I'm about to share with you is not an indictment around a certain group of people or a certain group of people that practice Shias. Thank you, my head. That practice a particular religion. Okay, but what I am going to share with you has to do with the next phase because this is how it's shown to us. And Oli Damagard has been a great teacher, by the way, great teacher. So look at the symbol of Cup Foods and what's below it. It's the underground. Look at who the Attorney General of Minnesota is. It's Keith Ellison. And Keith Ellison, I believe, was the first Muslim to be elected to the United States Senate. I think he was a senator. Now he's the Attorney General. So he's wielding law now. Do you know what kind of law that Keith Ellison is going to want to wield? It will not be American constitutional law. I guarantee you that. It will be Sharia law. And we know that Ilhan Omar is also a Muslim, came from Mogadishu, an area that, of course, the globalists went in and blew the fuck up and made it a living hellhole so that they could bring Somalians out who were already pissed off and weaponized and ready to go. Wonderful, wonderful game, isn't it? Isn't it just a wonderful uh, kind of look behind the curtains? How to foment generational rage and hatred. Insert ideology, whether it's socially Marxist or extremism. Right. So now we got Ilhan Omar, and now we got Keith Ellison. You know, and they are representative. They represent a certain group, and it's underground. Right. It is underground. It is below Cup Foods. So here we go. Like, you know, all the, you know, now they're saying that ISIS and Antifa are joining. Like this is like the new thing, right? It's the merger. Who started ISIS? ISIS came to power really during the Obama administration. ISIS was essentially being run off of Hillary Clinton's proxy server. That's what was happening. And they were getting all kinds of, you know, brand new Toyota trucks and all kinds of new shit, right? They were being funded heavily, heavily funded. And it always blew my mind that ISIS never went after Israel. No, they never went after Israel. And that was the difference. Like, you know, the old days with the PLO and Arafat and you know, I was watching. I sort of watched the beginning of this movie Black Sunday, which is about the you know a version of the PLO gonna blow up the Super Bowl with a Graf Zeppelin, and that was a Palestinian a terror group, right? It was a Palestinian terror group, and Martha Keller, the German actress, was in that movie, and she was Bruce Dern's handler, former fucked up Vietnam vet. He played a couple of those, didn't he? Coming Home with Jane Fonda, another fucked up Vietnam vet. That's a brutal movie. Coming Home. That's a Chiron and Aries kind of movie because you have a fully functioning Bruce Dern, at least physically, but he's so traumatized by the war, that he just goes off the deep end. And literally at the end of the movie, he's walking into the ocean. He's returning to Neptune, right? Neptune's cold embrace. Meanwhile, she has John Voight, who is a wounded veteran, another Chiron. I'm pretty sure that Coming Home took place during the Chiron and Aries era, and who is less of a man physically than Bruce Dern, but more of a man spiritually and emotionally, right? So Jane Fonda, who is known for, of course, her feminism, now begins to be this symbolic figure who embraces the wounded warrior. This is the new male, right? The old male was dysfunctional. He was dysfunctional. He may have had all of his limbs, but he was spiritually and mentally damaged, psychologically damaged. It's a very interesting movie, and into that Piscean, that Neptunian ending, right? And then what's left is this more spiritually functional, more emotionally functional wounded warrior. Isn't that interesting? That this is what this symbol of feminism will now accept. I mean, if you really want to boil it down, that they'll accept half a man. Not a whole man, but half a man. It's just some interesting symbolism here. By the way, Jane Fonda, I think she's a Sagittarius, if I'm not mistaken. Peter Fonda, the brother, is a Pisces. So, so the next, we're going to be dealing now with this whole ISIS thing again. It went away for a while. It's going to rear its ugly head. Apparently, ISIS and Antifa, I think, are basically being run by the same people, are now joining forces. So when I think of it, I kind of get a bit of a sick stomach, right? You get a bit of a sick stomach. And now that they've effectively muzzled, isn't that interesting how muzzled and Muslim kind of sound alike? We're into some word tripping today. It must be Emily. Now that they've effectively muzzled independent voices to speak out against just about anything now, good luck. And a lot of that anti-Muslim rhetoric, I didn't dig it, right? Like I knew some of these people and they were just throwing like gasoline on a fire, like Pamela Geller. I don't like that woman. And she's a hardcore Zionist. And I remember like some weird thing where like there was some anti-Muslim sort of art or something in Dallas that she was involved with, and her group was, and there was some weird shit that happened with the death of, it's just bizarre shit. We've been in through bizarre shit land over the last, really since 9/11. Let's be honest about that. We've been in bizarre shit land since 9/11. And it's just getting more and more bizarre, and to the point now where it's really pretty dangerous. Anyway, so I'm giving you sort of the next thread here, right? The next thread. And pay attention to that thread. It's a very important thread. All right. I'm going to leave you with a really good story. So I just bought a used washer and dryer. And I had, what's one of these while I was late for today's show? I had a 4-pronged dryer and a 3-pronged socket. Now I can do a lot of things, right? I'm pretty handy, but being an electrician is not one of them. It's not my. It is not my thing. Not my thing. I can do maybe a few things, but I got Chiron in Aquarius, 3rd house. It could be shocking. And I remember I told you this story about my lip with a kid, right? Bite into the cord, getting the shock. Anyway, so I decided I'm gonna call up an electrician, because there are 2 ways you can change the machine, right? You can either change the socket or you can change the plug. See, this is a very interesting kind of Gemini story for you. Little true node in Gemini, a little solar Gemini story for you. You can change the socket or you can change the plug. Which one is going to be easier? Which one is going to be more expensive? Right? I determined that changing the socket is going to be way more expensive. And since I don't own this house, I'm not going to, go in and make a change on the socket side. But on the plug side, that's different. So I went into, search, typed in electrician, blah, 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 right? And I always go to the place that has the highest rating. I start at the top and I see what I can find. I generally think there's a high rating for a reason. And I'm usually pretty right about that. So guy answers the phone. He's the owner of the company. I get the owner of the company. And I tell him what my story is. He says, well, I'm on my way to Lukenbach. I could come over and help you out. Sweetest guy. Sweetest guy. Okay. His name is Javier. Comes into my house, and he winds up changing the plug. Takes him all of 20 minutes because he knows what he's doing. Would have taken me like 2-3 hours, and I might have short circuited my brain in the process. So, of course, I want to strike up a conversation with him. He's originally from Durango, in Mexico. Came here, had absolutely nothing. Big donut hole, nothing. I'm like, okay, so I want to know more, right? So I thought, oh, well, what did you do when you got here to make money? And he said, I worked picking pecans. I have to say that correctly now because I live in Texas. I started working picking pecans. I said, oh, I see. He says, oh, and then I worked at the turkey factory. And I said, well, is there a turkey factory here in town? Not anymore, burned down. I'm like, oh, interesting. When places burn down, you got to pay attention to that. You got to pay attention when places burn down. I said, oh, that's interesting. So they didn't rebuild the turkey plant? No, they didn't. We talked a lot about, the wineries and all this other stuff. 67 years old, and has kids, has a grandkid now who's going to be 19. And then he said that he wanted to start his own business, and he went to electrician school in San Antonio. And I said, so, did you work another job while you were doing this? He said, oh, no. He said, well, we had a little money, and my wife worked 2 jobs to get me through school. And he says, she's a very good woman. I said, you bet your ass. It's hard to find good women these days. Oh, there are quite a few in Chatlandia, though. Quite a few in Chatlandia. In fact, every single one of them. Not just quite a few. Every single one of them. Good men, too. Equal. Libra. There you go. So then he became an electrician and started his own business. And had a family and grandkids, and all his kids are doing well. I'm like, this is the American story right here. This is the American. This guy walked across the border and he didn't have shit. He started picking pecans, worked at the turkey factory, and now he's got a business. And he says, oh, I live really close to you. Oh, well, that's great. That's cool. And he charged me a certain price, and it wasn't that much money, to be honest. And you know what? I gave him more. I gave him more money because, sometimes if you just, I don't know, sometimes you just do that, right? And it's a good thing to do. And I've had to learn this. I've had to learn that sometimes, because he came out of his way. I'm going to give him like some extra money and just, pay that thing forward and keep the energy moving. Okay. Keep the energy moving. And I was just really inspired by the guy's story, and just, what a good dude he was. Just rolled right in, took care of business. And I got to learn about his life. And it's not the first time something like this has happened to me. One time when I was living in California, a very similar story. Another immigrant from Mexico, right? This guy comes to California. What does he do? California's got its own version of the pecan. It's called the eucalyptus nut. So this guy worked on trimming trees. He noticed that the eucalyptus, pods were everywhere. And he said, we should be doing something with these eucalyptus pods. And so what he did was he and his brother started to harvest. When you do these trees, people say, yeah, take the pod. They started selling these eucalyptus pods and anything from the plant that they could get their hands on. And they were selling it to people that were processing eucalyptus. He started to make money. He started to make serious money. What did he and his brother do? They set up a farm in Central California and they were growing trees there, right? They were growing all different kinds of trees and fruits. And it's like he came to the country with nothing, absolutely nothing. And now he's got his own business, very inspirational. That guy was a very deep Christian. I was hitchhiking. He picked me up. I'll give you another story. Same vein. When I lived in California, lived in Albany, and my next door neighbor was a guy by the name of Arturo. I loved this guy. I loved him. He's great guy. He got kicked out of Mexico because of NAFTA. Lost his ranch. Told the story before. Came to the United States. First he moved to Chicago. Then he came to California. This guy went from having a ranch to cleaning toilets. Think about that. The globalists essentially upped the price on everything so that he couldn't afford his ranch anymore. So he went from being a landowner and being productive to cleaning toilets. Then he moved to California and he moved into this house that was next door to me and became a handyman. And he worked for the guy across the street who was a subcontractor. And I got to know him and I'd go over to his house and I'd drink beer with him. He was a great guy. I really liked Arturo. A very cool dude. I used to go over there and drink beer and watch this show called I think it's called 12 Signs in Spanish. It was like this astrological dating show. I didn't know what the fuck they were saying, but I thought it was amusing. And just a good dude, really good dude. And he had to leave. He had to leave that house. Somebody was going to buy that house. And he got screwed over. The woman who owned the house said she was going to do a deal with him, that if he made all these improvements and did all the things, that when it came time to sell the house, she was going to sell the house to him. It was not in her will. Then of course, her family decided to get really greedy with the house, and they put it up for auction. And then he had to leave, and he wound up going way out to the East Bay, and he picked up his life, and he did it again. Right? It's a story of resiliency and determination. His wife was so traumatized by having to come to the United States that she refused to learn English. I don't blame her. There are good stories out there, people. There are good stories. We have people that are true allies of our hearts, true allies of a real spirit. They're amongst us. And I like to share these stories. And they may not be, these divine revelations from on high, but we have to remember that we're in the sign of Gemini. So it's all local and every little bit helps. All right. Maybe, maybe you can send me your stories. If you have any real stories, send me your stories. You guys know what my email address is. Yeah. All right. I'm out of here. I'm out of here for today. Let me check in back with you guys. And let's see where we're at. Ani says, I've cleaned dog shit and puke for years. Ain't no shame. Yes. Agreed. Ani, yep. That is how I was raised. My work is worthy respect. The spiritual force has been good and evil. How's Bug doing, Robert? I must know. The Bug bugged out. He was in some kind of like Tai Chi. He was doing like some kind of bug Tai Chi. I was watching him. He was doing some kind of bug Tai Chi. He was gathering energy. And then he flew. He took off. Don's got 9 dogs and 7 cats. Yeah, you know my stories. Pick one. Yeah, everybody's got their tales to tell around that kind of work. We've all kind of been there, done that. Um, you know, it's part of being an apprentice in life. It's part of being an apprentice in life, and there's no shame. Everybody needs to go through the sixth house, and I've talked about this before. Everybody needs to go through the sixth house astrologically. This is how the chart operates. You start off on the ascendant in Aries. You have the manifestation of spirit and will in the body, first breath, right? And you start moving around the chart. And you go from the fifth house, which is childhood, the things that you love, and maybe you find something that you love so that you can take it and work on it. And the sixth house is a house of work and apprenticeship. And what happens, or what happened in our society, is we disrupted that process, and then we went from the sixth house to the ninth house, right? We skipped a whole lot in between, a whole lot in between. Now, they don't do that in Israel, by the way. You got 2 years, and you got to do your IDF work. And I'm telling you right now, that's some sixth house work. They do the same thing in Switzerland. Do 2 years worth of service, and then you can move on. You get some bennies, right? But we've taken the sixth house out of the equation. And now, like, even stuff like having, McJobs and McDonald's or paper routes and mowing lawns and all those things that, people used to do, they're just not there anymore, right? They're just not there anymore. So the sixth house has been eviscerated and evaporated in a lot of ways, or in other instances, it's been outsourced. All right. I'll be back tomorrow, 8:45 sharp on the dot. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to say what's possible. Thank you for being a part of today's stream. Of course, it'll probably be, cycling, cycling, cycling. I'll have to make it private when I do, or unlisted rather. Then I'm going to bring it back up. If you like this show, you want to support this show. If you liked last night's show, you want to support last night's show, there'll be a link to do that. I'm still doing readings. I'm busy as hell. Everybody who's ordered a reading, today's my day to get back to you. So that's happening today. This is my Monday day of correspondence. All right. Use your head in order to discern what's real. Heart said what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix, signing off for today. Bye for now.